Welcome to a new episode of DevSecOps Talk with Matthias. And today I'm the only host here, but I have a guest. Welcome, Joachim.
Hi, my name is Joachim. I'm one of the partners and founders for Peltech. We're a small boutique consulting that just helps these days a lot of organizations, whether it's the government, commercial, small startups, mid-sized companies around anything high availability, high scale, cloud native, especially cloud native type of area, anything from deployment, security, like all that fun jazz.
Everything. And you're based in the US, right? Because
We're based in the US, although we've done a decent amount of work in Europe as well with things like the STEM in the UK and a few other organizations as well. So for the most part, we're in the US space of things, but at the same time, Europe, and we've done also work in Asia and whatnot, although a little bit lighter on the Asia side.
cool. And today we're going to follow up. Last episode, we had our friend Steve over, which is running platform here he's based in Spain, but he's from the UK, right? And we talked about the platform just bloating up with stuff from the cloud native landscape and more tools adding in. And how he comes in and try to clean up the platform and make it workable again. But I think you and I can discuss like how does platform get bloated like that, and we talked before about how you as a platform engineer should think when you start building your platform. So maybe when you come in with a new project, you get a nice green field area, and someone asks I'm a developer here, can you help me build a platform for me? Where are the stones you start picking for? Where is the cloud native tools you starting picking, and how should you get started with this fair area?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question. I would actually say it's very rare that we get greenfield. So oftentimes we're probably already into
You should start in a startup or something. You get greenfield all the time, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. So in those instances, that usually ends up for us being relatively simple because we've got a few over the years. We've kind of built up a piece that we call foundation that is kind of like just some very loosely structured and loose guidelines to have set up cloud structure for AWS or GCP or Azure or whatnot. And then since we tend to geek out on Kubernetes, now again, that ends up being a little bit of okay, what's the team composition? What's their experience? How deep do they know things? Are they going to understand the tech? But yeah.
Yeah, but let's start it when should you pick a different cloud, right? When should you go to GCP, AWS, or Azure? Do you have anything, how you will rate things here, when picking the cloud? Do you have a favorite, or is I always go there, or
As a developer, I think my favorite is definitely GCP. I'm oh yeah,
GCP.
GCP is probably my favorite from a development standpoint. The APIs are cleaner. There's a good and bad with that. Services kind of disappear every now and then way more because Google's oh, this isn't working for us, and they're jettison it out. But in terms of the speed and the response time and just how fast and solid everything is, I really personally like GCP. From then a largest clients and just what everybody uses, AWS is just massively there. So AWS is definitely the next piece of where it's okay, it's kind of it's maybe a little bit like the Java of the land of it's been there for a long time. It's solid workhorse. It's there. It might be a little bit slower at times, but it's good. And then Microsoft and Azure is definitely they've come a long way since, a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I still really struggle every time having to get forced to use.
Yeah, Azure. It was a long time.
That's definitely on my list. Yeah.
Maybe, I think I have the same, right? We're using GCP for my private and then AWS for professional, but then Azure was a long time ago. But sometimes I feels like when you should pick your cloud, right? You have a service that is running, right? You have some application maybe, and then I think you should aim for the application, where can you run the application most? And I feel some organization maybe go to Azure because they already have some email 360, and then they go for that one. I don't see that many companies go for Google because they have Gmail. They can just go for Gmail with the mail, but they still use AWS for the cloud.
Yeah, I see that often. I'll see Google Workspaces and AWS often together. It's a little annoying because weirdly enough, and I love Google Workspaces. I'd rather use that versus Outlook any day. But
Yeah.
the Entra integration with AWS, for example, for Identity Center is like just massively better. Just the way that it syncs to groups with the Skim piece and all that kind of stuff is just way more in line. With Google
Yeah.
Workspaces, you have to do like set up a Lambda to like sync the groups and do all that kind of stuff, which is a little bit more a pain in the butt. But like
Yeah.
that being said, I see that a lot more than say like, and then you see a lot more of the Microsoft native folks that will then go to Azure because they're doing it. But you don't
Yeah.
see, I see a lot of Google Workspaces are still AWS. It's not then going strongly to GCP. So I think you're totally right. But I
Yeah.
think also part of it is the decisions sometimes, a lot of times for the cloud providers, weirdly enough, aren't like, don't come necessarily from the technical side. It's almost more like
Yeah.
the finance groups or like there's some other, not the folks that actually have to deal with building it that make the final decision. It's
Yeah.
usually the, how does it look for, I don't know, investors or things along those lines.
Yeah, I remember a work. Yeah, it's another story I can bring up here. But okay, let's go back to our platform engineering. We talked about before this call, and we had a great chat about like who is the client of the platform engineering that's building. I think that's where we should start, right?
Yeah, so from my opinion is that the delivery teams are the client. Like at the
Yeah,
end of the, well, I mean, at the end of the day, the true client is whoever your product's for.
yeah,
But your client as a platform engineering team is not like your job is not to make your job faster and easier. And I think
yeah,
oftentimes we see that like we'll go
yeah,
somewhere and the platform engineers will be like, look, I spent this week to make my job this much faster. And you're like, hey,
yeah,
no, you're an amplifier to the organization. So your job is to make the delivery team simpler and easier, which
yeah,
I think ties a little bit into like how in the organization do you get like another tool and another tool and another
yeah,
tool and another tool and all this bloat is this kind of thing of like platform engineers are like, oh my gosh, I can take this and add this here and it'll make my job easier. And
yeah,
ultimately it should really be like, does it help like a product thought to get to production faster? Are you
yeah,
helping your developers being able to have better visibility into what they're working on and able to deliver through the pipeline and into production faster? Like that's really your job as a platform engineer.
yeah. And I think that's so interesting. But how do you measure that you're having a successful platform? Like, how would you know that you actually done your job right? Because as a platform, you're delivering this tool, right? Am I doing a good work here? Like, or as a developer, to look at a platform, like, is this platform really doing what it should, right? How would
Yeah.
you see that, and how can you measure that?
So I think that there's a few ways. I mean, some of them are super subjective and some of them are objective.
Yeah,
Because I mean, some of them are like a little bit maybe touchy feely. So I mean, there's the same. I would say similar ways that you measure at least like the how much do people like your product.
yeah,
I mean, surveys are a little bit like janky sometimes, but you can kind of like see how people are using it and like people work with them and people say like, hey, are they at the end of the day, like are developers happy and like, are they like enjoying their development experience? So the
yeah,
whole like DX, or I think that's what they call it these days, like
yeah,
developer experience that you have of it of
yeah,
like, is that solid throughout the flow? And like, can you be able to get some feedback from the actual teams on how it's going? So I think that's one. Um, the actual to me, and this is a little bit weird because it is entirely tied to the platform team, but it's not solely dependent on the platform team because depending on how the delivery teams are set up to be able to do delivery, if they have like long batches, it's a little harder to measure.
yeah,
But if you deliver what is the cycle time of ID through the system, so at the very least, when code gets developed, the cycle time from then to when it makes it in production, I think that's a solid measure of at least as a platform, are you getting better? And then of
how,
course
yeah,
uptime, availability, and the normal metrics that way. But I would say cycle time is my favorite. That's my favorite metric. I love cycle time metrics.
yeah. But that means like from push to main or your master, and then out to production. Like that time should be quick as. But does it also mean like I'm creating a new project here, like from a completely blank field, like a greenfield project into production? Because I see sometimes like the flow is kind of good set up and you can deploy quickly, but when you come with a new project, like, oh, I have a new app here, then it's like, oh, but then we need secrets. Yeah. Okay, which branch are you deploying from? And that is also kind of not streamlined, how I would say.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I mean, there's a few things like even when you mention like, hey, what branch are we deploying from? And I'm very much a like automatically when I hear that, I'm like, ooh, I'm like, no branches, no branches, tags and promotions, tags and promotions.
Yeah.
So I think there's an aspect of like when it's greenfield, I tend to be able to say like, hey, it's greenfield, you're just starting out. Like if you can basically take all the normal steps you'd have in the pipeline for all the testing, all the like various like promotion pieces, you just say, hey, commit, go to production, commit, go to production, because you're not having a lot of people using it. I mean, again, there's a lot of it depends in there because like if it's an internal service versus if it's a new product or whatever. But let's say it's a new product, you can just say, hey, goes to like you just commit, goes to production, commit, goes to production. Then you're saying, okay, now I'm starting to get some like issues. There's people using it. Now I need to have like, you know, the automating of tests should probably also be in there. But like you start getting some of the automation of tests, and then you start building out the resilience of the system throughout. So again, I tend to be very much cycle time. So at the beginning, I'm very much go to prod, go to prod, go to prod. Okay, now it's time to add some steps in there. But as those steps go in there, it's like, okay, how do we make those steps faster?
That's interesting. I'd say the same way. I say like highway to production, right? They don't have to be that complicated. Just like get it up and get it to production, right? Quick. Don't that much step in the beginning, and then when you have the highway, you can start adding the steps and like. But the flow is already flowing. But
exactly.
How do you see this? Yeah, sorry.
And I think one of the common mistakes that I've seen is that what ends up happening is when you have, let's say you start with like you just go straight to production, then something bad happens. Like there's a bug that makes it in, there's something weird, and then the natural inclination is not okay. How do we do something that still keeps the flow to prod fast? The natural inclination is like, ooh, we can't deploy to prod now that quickly. Let's do a bunch of steps in the way to be able to say, hey, let's have like a QA team that's going to do a pass and do a full thing. Let's do all these things that inherently slow the system down to be able to then say, hey, like we want to verify everything as much as possible. And I guess I would say that that's an easy trap to get into, because what ends up happening is as you slow things down, and you say, hey, now instead of having small batches go through, we're going to have larger batches because now we have to do all these verifications, all these security audits, all these things that oftentimes at the beginning are manual. Then you have these large batches. That now goes from having like an every hour delivery to maybe a week or a month or 6 months or whatever happens. And now the risk is we spent all this work into this. We really, really need for it to be perfect, but it's never perfect. So then there's like another critical issue that comes up when you deploy it, and now you add more things that slow it more down. So the crux is that's a natural way to like go into things taking longer and longer and longer versus focusing on how do we address like the issue in the pipeline to still keep the velocity through.
And I talked with a friend about this as well, and he wasn't a developer or platform, and he said, oh, you have an AI pipeline. And I was thinking like AI proven pipeline, which means that a developer can have 10 simultaneously like changes going on and then push them out frequently like as they're done. That's also good, because as you said, like you stock it up now and the developer is making 5 times as much code or features, like that pile of stuff you need to deploy just becomes 5 times larger, right? So getting that small batches out quickly, it's the way forward. But where do you see like the golden path? What do you her different values, like golden path? But I don't like that, because that means it's one path that you need to walk, and I don't like that. And it will be like golden rules,
golden principles, maybe.
Golden How do you see that fits in here?
I mean, man, this is probably like the consulting thing of like it depends type of answer that goes into it.
Always consulting out of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like that. Like it's like, Well, it depends, and I almost hate
Yeah,
saying it, so I have to say, well, the stereotypical consulting answer is it depends. But
yeah,
I think that generally speaking, there's a what I like and what I try to usually push system towards are
yeah.
focusing on simplicity to understand, not necessarily simplicity to create. So sometimes
Okay.
it's very hard to, and there's a great chat from Rich Hickey that talks about this, the simple made easy.
Okay.
And one of the pieces in there is that's very hard to create simple systems that are easy to reason about, and it's very
Yeah.
easy to create systems that are very hard to reason about.
Yeah.
And so I tend to really like, as we're like evolving, that the first version should always be very simple to understand. And
Yeah.
oftentimes that's usually pretty at the beginning is also relatively easy to create. But
Yeah.
then as things go on, it's sometimes the easy thing to add in is actually the wrong thing because it complexes and like intertwines things more. And I really value the ability to change things out. So if we're
Yeah.
talking about like saying, hey, how do we do things in a way like these days, Argo CD is like, kind of like the go-to for GitOps,
Yeah.
and it's been that way for a little while. But still, even when we do that, we try to think like, okay, what would it look like if we wanted to switch that component out? Like, have we intertwined everything in so much that switching this tooling out would be like horribly complicated and hard? Then that
Yeah.
probably means we've kind of intertwined things way more than we should have. And that to me is like a guiding principle that I use all the time is how hard would it be to remove this out, yank it out, replace it with some new thing that's come out in just in the ecosystem in general that would be better. If
Yeah.
I'm so beholden to this that I can't shift later on, then that to me is a pretty big smell of saying, ooh, I've intertwined this in a way that's probably hard to understand, because if it was easy to understand, it probably wouldn't be too hard to like rip it out and
Yeah.
replace it. And that to me is like the principle that I think is a very strong guiding principle.
I like that a lot. I mean, the idea of just replacing things without a buzz really something that I stand by as well, right? And I think sometimes you end up with tools that have been chosen probably for good reason, but they're stuck in this system because somebody added it there and then they're stuck with it and now they know about the tool and they don't want to change because adding a new tool would make things in a new way, right? So
Yeah.
the ability to question any tool and say like, okay, we have this tool now, like how quick can we change this tool and to what, right? And what is the consequences of it? Like that would be
Yep.
really something. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I find that it's also like just change in general is also really, I mean, I find it really interesting because in tech, like things change
Yeah.
so much. It's like,
Yeah.
and maybe that's a little bit of part of the problem. It changes so much that especially like if you're in like the, JavaScript node land of things,
Yeah.
that like
Yeah.
there's a new library every 3 seconds or whatever. But like, there's also this aspect of where a lot of folks in development tend to be really happy to maybe try new libraries and things like that. But
Yeah.
their idea of like trying to change their flow over some of the toolings that they use is much, much harder.
Yeah.
And I find that unfortunate because oftentimes changing your tools with whatever's coming up, like even these days, I know plenty of folks that really don't want to switch their tooling to use, like Claude CLI or Gemini CLI or whatever is the AI tool of the day. It seems like AI right now is almost synonymous with like the JavaScript of where there's a new agent or a new thing that's coming up. But like the fact that they don't want to do that also just has a huge impact on your productivity. And so I would very much say that being able to switch out your tooling and being able to switch out the flow and having that capability is just a huge win.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, I agree completely. One of the things, no, but I mean, platform is standing up like, and also, but so go back to the golden path, right? We see that how would you set the principles, right? The principle, do you have any principle that you added when you come in? Say like, oh, we need to, one of the principles could be like, we containerize things, we're using Helm. What would be some of the principles that you're adding to a golden path here?
So on the tooling side, I would say that there's a few principles that like, I mean, and again, depends on the organization, but if I was to say, here's the general pass, there's a few things I think like help pretty fast right off the bat. So a lot of organizations still use like Git flow for a lot of like the branching strategy, promotion strategy, and everything. And probably one of the first things we start pushing is really being able to do like just trunk-based development like entirely. And there's a few tools that we use pretty heavily. Release Please on the GitHub side is one of those that we do pretty heavily on being able to like be able to introduce change, have a nice change log, everything going on, release tags, and be able to like promote releases that way. Containerization is like 100% one of the first things we also do in that. So usually within a part of that pipeline, we'll do the containerizations and then go into that piece. At the same time, there's usually a little bit of two paths. There's the path of like what we take on the delivery of the products and the artifacts themselves. So that what I described is, and with Renovate to be able to manage updates and all that kind of stuff for the dependencies and whatnot. Those are kind of the tools and the path we do in that side. The other side on more of the platform piece, we tend to, I mean, again, we're a heavy Kubernetes shop. So like we tend to go down that path and we build a lot of tooling around it. But we tend to have usually just some principles around, again, how to keep Kubernetes as simple as possible. So in the AWS land, we'll usually be in the EKS side with Carpenter for like scaling up the nodes. One of the things that we do that not every group does, but that we'll tend to do pretty effectively is we'll end up having like the LB controller, that's the Amazon load balancer controller, but that's only doing the service for an actual different ingress controller. So that it's basically backed by ALB, but we're still actually writing all of the ingresses in not ALB. Because I have opinions there about like not using ALB because there's so many like rough edges there. And these days you can't use Nginx ingress controller since it's now gone. So there's a few options there that we moved on that would be fun to talk about. But that being said, setting up the platform in that side that way. And then we'll tend to have Argo be like the main tooling that we'll use to be able to pull in all the artifacts, deploy, and make sure that the cluster is all in sync. And those are kind of the two paths that we go through. Again, we rely, I mean, I've almost probably described most of the tools that we use right there in that conversation. Like we even use Renovate to then pull the dependencies from the build side. I mean, sometimes it's image updater if it's the lower environments to be able to like get the latest image out. But we'll use Renovate for the production environments to actually pull from the Helm charts or the actual container images that get published by the actual artifacts. So all those kind of things, there's like the product delivery pipeline of artifacts that we try to really separate out and say, hey, you're delivering this product as fast as possible. And then we have like the platform side that's more of a how do we maintain every environment and platform to be entirely the same, to treat them as cattle, and that they just pull in the artifacts from the delivery teams that way. Helm we found to be like, I like Helm. It's a love and hate relationship with Helm. I love Helm. At the same time, I hate Helm sometimes. It's once you really get it, you're like, okay, cool, it's easy. But I remember hating it at the beginning. So giving that directly to folks that don't interact with Kubernetes all the time is frankly kind of a pain in the ass sometimes. So we tend to lean. Okay.
No, sorry. How much of the offload to the developer then, right? Because that's also like a golden question. Someone said like the developer don't need to know anything, right? They can write their code and then push to Git and then they can go for coffee, right? And some people say like, no, you know what? You build this stuff, you need to know a little bit more how it's run so you can optimize for the runtime.
So there's two things that I would say about that is I don't think that there is an absolute rule of like how much should the developer be involved or not. But the way that we treat it is that I've seen too many times of where like if developers aren't also kind of responsible for some of the ops and understanding the infrastructure that it runs on and the availability of it, then you just kind of get lazy and you don't write things necessarily in a way that maybe is going to be as easy. And there's also times where a 2-minute change or a slight change in the structure of the code makes it infinitely easier to deploy. And so there's an aspect there of where if you go back to maybe like the true DevOps side of things, not the rebranded operations with new, I guess, dev tools. I'm not sure exactly what it's really turned on, but
nobody knows where it ended up. It just ended up nobody knows anymore, right?
No. Well, it's like you don't really have ops people anymore. You have DevOps people. So I feel like
it's the same people. But it's the same
people. It's just new tools. Whereas like DevOps in principle before was like, hey, let's have dev and ops work together. Let's cross-pollinate. Let's have a better understanding, collaboration.
Yeah.
So if you go back to like that original principle, then I feel like that's a much better route. Is the aspect of, as a platform team, you want to make it as easy as possible for the delivery team to do it. But that doesn't mean hide everything. So oftentimes I've seen platform teams that are like, oh yeah, we'll do this, and like here we'll give you like an interface that might be the YAML file for the Helm file that's like kind of translated and easy to understand or whatever.
Yeah.
But then you don't understand the mechanics behind it. You don't understand the trade-offs, blah, 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 like everything around it. So I'm very much make all your repos, like if you have your Helm charts repo and everything, document it, make it where anyone on the dev team can PR request in. I'm a very big proponent of having, like when there's a change that the dev team needs, to be able to say, hey, let's have a couple folks from the dev team work with the platform team on making that change, even though the platform team is who's responsible for it. Then the delivery team can start having an understanding of how the whole system works in a deeper manner. And then just everybody wins. So that's more of my thing. It's not the delivery should know everything, because man, if everybody has to know everything, like I don't think we have enough time in the world to do that. But not knowing anything also creates silos and doesn't really work. So it's a little bit of it's a pendulum that goes back and forth as the organization
it's
goes.
A balance. But also, I agree 100% to like adding the stuff in public so people can see it, and if they like, they can commit and make the change, right? So then it's like we have the same access to production. Like we just do different things. If you have the knowledge, you can do the change. Otherwise, I can do the change. But it doesn't help. And then also
I love the like maintainer model within like open source community within large organizations, just to be able to say, hey, we're maintainers of our areas. But it still means that anyone in the organization should be able to introduce change.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's kind of hard as well, because if you start making too much stuff in the platform, say that you're building your own CLI or anything like that, you start making dependencies. Like, so then it actually becomes like a developer wants to deploy something and using your CLI or anything, and they want to make something that is not supported, then you're slowing them down, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think also the more other people can introduce changes into your code, your repo, the platform, or whatever, the more it also exposes areas that you assume are easy just because you've been doing it. It's easy, like when you create something, it's easy to know what you did.
Yeah.
But then it becomes very hard to know, is the system actually easy? Or is it just that I know all the context and it's close to me? Like I understand the data. It doesn't inherently make it like simple.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm struggling with security. I don't know if there is a word for it, like when sometimes we have really smart people that set up things in security really complicated and good, right? And then I feel like, but how would I measure if these people like left or something happens and then new people come in? Like, how is the maintainability of the security feature? Like, how do you measure that? And that's also something that transists to the platform. If you build a platform that's too complex, like how will you come in like a new one? You pick someone for the street, like, or from school, like, oh, you know Kubernetes, fine, here, go in, can you figure this out? Like, what is this? Like, what?
Yeah.
Where should I start? Right.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I guess I feel like, having dealt with this for 20, 25 years or whatnot, I think that even from a security standpoint, I have never seen anything. I mean, I guess when systems are complex, to me that's anti-security, because if you can't comprehend like if it's complicated, you just can't keep all the context together. And granted, these days LLMs and everything can help you kind of like put all that context together, but even then, simple systems are much easier to be secure. They're much easier to change. They're much easier to be able to like adapt and move. So
Yeah.
like simplicity is really, in my mind, the goal. And we have areas where you have to have complexity. Like there are actual legit hard problems. There's legit pieces where it's like, hey, there's complicated pieces. I think the places we get stuck as engineers is that oftentimes like, look at this complicated thing I created, and your ego is like, look how smart I am. And I'm like, man, I would love if we could like redirect the narrative there to say, hey, it is the really smart people are the ones that create simple things.
Yeah.
And if we could get people to like buy off on that, I would be happy for humanity.
Yeah. Yeah, really. But I think that's also something that people start blocking, right? You build something, you want to be proud about it, and then you are reluctant to change it, right? And what you're talking about here is also change, right? Like I build something, but the industry is changing, and now I need to adapt what I have to something else, right? And you need to be able then to change what you build.
Yeah. Well, and there's an interesting thing there too that I think ties in there, is that was it? There's somebody that's talking to me about like, well, like developers aren't really factory line workers because you're not really doing the same thing. They're like more like artists because they create their own thing. And I was like, well, I don't particularly like the aspect of artists. I think designers is probably maybe a little closer of an analogy because to me, the artist is still tied, that the thing that you created is tied to your identity and who you are. And I'm like, I want my thing to get wiped out. Like if I build something, I want it to get removed eventually and have something better replace it. Like my goal is not for it to outlive me. My goal is for that to help progress and get the totality of everything to be better. So there's an interesting nuance there of where like where do you tie your ego and your identity to? And you have organizations, and this even ties into organizations that are very strong ego tied, I feel have a lot of that kind of dysfunction where if it's tied to a collective good, then it's less about does this thing stay exactly the way it is because I created it. You kind of want it to get destroyed and rebuilt.
So I mean, if we roll back what we're talking about here, like first it's like the platform people, they're building the platform they're making is for the developing team or developers, right? To make sure that they actually can produce things as quick as the business needs, right? And we want the platform to be as simple as possible with as less tools and things in it as possible, because that means easier to maintain, probably run quicker, less things to everything is simple but
fewer things to break, fewer things to maintain, fewer things to upgrade. If you need to change something out, it's simpler to change something out. I would say the fewer amount of things that you can have in the system, the easier it is to understand.
But is that the way how we should convince people to start working this way? Is that like you do this way, and which means that the business will deliver more things quicker, you will have less security incident, less downtime, like it's so many benefits, and when we talk about it, it's like this is obvious, but still, I mean,
it's obviously the way to go, and it's obviously the way that we go, and also everybody believes they're a snowflake. Every company we've ever gone in is like, we can't do this because, and they list a list, and it's like, I've almost gotten to a point where I'm like, I can predict what you're about to say. It's going to be like X, Y, and Z because like, like we have delivery cycles, or we have customers, or we have like, there's always like a reason why you can't, and you always can.
Security is always a good reason people stop things, right?
Yeah. Well, it's always like, I mean, it's security, bugs, quality. There's interesting things of where there's, oh shoot, I forgot the book, but there's like a whole interesting study that's been doing of where we've worked with a group where they added an ERB and an ARB for like the review boards for release changes and all this kind of stuff. And there's an interesting thing that like the faster you can deliver, you actually get better security, better quality, and better like actual like throughput through the system. And the more you slow it down, you go the opposite. So all these things that they add in the name of security and quality actually does the exact opposite. And the truth is that they don't know because they're not even really measuring it. Exactly. They don't actually measure it. So it's all it feels right to everyone. So they do it because it feels right. But when you look at the actual hard code data on it, like that's fundamentally not true. The way that we try to get organizations to kind of go back to your answer of like, how do we get people to buy off on it? One is I don't think I don't think it's a good idea anyways. If you're an organization that's kind of like has been pretty slow and has gotten into having ERBs, ARBs, security, like thing, all check marks as doing Git flow and having massive complicated releases and all of that kind of stuff. I don't think it's a good idea for you to be like, oh, cool, let's throw that all out the door. Let's deliver fast to prod and let's go and we won't have any issues. I think that's going to be a recipe for disaster. But saying, hey, try small experiments. Like, let's take a section of it out and let's see if we can start doing code promotions. And code promotions are a very easy place to start because you can at least promote artifacts. You don't have to deliver all the time, but you can at least start getting the delivery of code in a very like solid place. And then you can do one project and maybe the folks are a little bit more open to change and that can maybe, you know, pull in folks that have experience to help them kind of do those initial changes. Then you can kind of work with the platform team on how to then deliver the artifacts faster. So you've at least kind of said, hey, we can create artifacts more rapidly. Now, how do we deliver those more rapidly? It's a little bit harder the other way around, but you can still do it. It's fine if you want to deliver things faster and then catch up on the front end a little bit easier. But it's a little, though the platform side tends to be more intertwined. There's more risk involved on like how you change things. So usually I feel like creating the artifacts is you get a little bit more wins and buy off from people to do that way. So to me, that's a really good path to just get folks kind of to get started on that.
Cool. But I mean, we talked about the platform team being the ones that used promote like helping the developers. Like, would you say that the security team is also there for like making sure that the developer and the platform team can work quicker and then make the business like, or where do you see, is that the chain more or less, like that the security is not for, is that for the, like when the delivery to the business, or would it be the security team would be for the platform that then becomes the application and then the business? So how do you see the chain of like people here
the chain of where it is? So there's an interesting thing. So I personally view security a little bit like QA, that it's not like the team is not that like, it's not an afterthought, right? You don't say like QA oftentimes and I tend to start an organization saying we're not calling them QA. We are calling them verification. They are a component of quality. They're not the quality team. Like the quality is the whole system together. You bake in different levels of quality. Like some of the quality comes from products. Some of the quality comes from development. Some of the quality goes from there. Same thing with security. Some of the security is going to be from product and like, how do we think about things and design the product? It's going to be on the development side of how do we write code. So it's going to be on the tooling on how do we bring in the latest dependencies. It's going to be on how do we verify the security issues and how do we do all those kind of things. So if I was to say what's my ideal, it would be that you have more of like inside the organization security consultants, like internal security consulting and internal QA consulting, and kind of more in that path of where those groups' goal is not how do I catch a security issue? Those groups' goal is how do I reduce the risk and the exposure to the product overall, which means that their goal should be aligned to how do we deliver faster and more secure, not how do I just stop security? Because if that's their goal, if their goal is we are going to block every security issue, the best way to do that is delete your product, get rid of your product. Or stop making any changes. Those are really like, if that's their goal, they will do everything to stop it. And it's not because they're being malicious. It's because that's literally that's what they've been assigned to do. That's their piece. So for me, like I would strongly advise companies to treat security as more of a consulting practice of experts that know how to be able to say, how do we make the system and the whole delivery process more secure while not slowing it down. Like it has to be an and, not an or.
Yeah, it needs to be a new name for that component, like to help out. But it was funny when I worked with PCI-DSS, the consultants are like, you know what, if your system is down, it's fine, because then nobody can steal your card number. So for PCI-DSS, then you're secure, right? It's kind of the same, right? You're
But
down, you can't get hacked. Yeah, perfect security.
But that's exactly. I mean, the fact. I mean, are you actually being serious that they actually said that, or like,
it was not. It was maybe over a beer, right? But
Yeah,
still,
yeah, yeah,
right? They said like, okay, but this is the thing, right? If you're down, you
yeah.
can't get hacked. So I mean, yeah,
Well, that is touches exactly on the problem, right? Is like
yeah,
that. It's like, sweet, it's down, it's secure. My job is
yeah,
like, I'm fine because like it's down. I don't have anything to secure, and you're like, wait a second here, like
yeah,
you're our jobs, and I say this oftentimes to like engineers and everything, your job is not to write code. Like, yes, like that's the activity that you're doing. But of all of our jobs is to solve problems. Like we're
yeah,
solving problems. Like there's a higher level thing that we should be striving for. And
yeah,
not just the task or the action that we've been given. Like we don't need to be the computer. We can, we're capable of like higher level thinking. So we should be able to always say, hey, if I'm a developer, I should be thinking not just how do I make my job easier, but how do I make the whole system better? If
yeah,
I'm in quality, I should be like, how do I make the quality of the system better? And granted, I have my job that I'm responsible for, but it doesn't dismiss us from being like, ooh, let's not think about anything else. And
yeah.
yeah,
But the question is like, I can say like, okay, in security, like I can make sure that the system is secure, but I would also like to share the knowledge, right? So that other
yeah,
people can use my knowledge to secure the system, because then actually the security of everything will increase, right? Instead of me being a blocker and like slowly adding my
exactly.
security to everything. Like I need to share the
Yeah,
knowledge as well, and that's also for QA. Like share the knowledge how you can qualify your everything in this, right? Um,
yeah. Well, and it's a trade-off, right? Like you're never going to have a perfectly secure system.
no,
So it's how do
never.
we make it better? Like, how do we make it better, simpler, easy to understand? How do we share the knowledge? How do we shift that left? And how do we try to catch all those issues earlier on, catching any security potential issues or any things that we have earlier on is just cheaper and, easier than it is
Yeah,
at the end.
yeah.
So I think all those things tie in hand in hand.
It's also funny because not funny. I don't know if that word. When I talk with you and Andre and Pauline and Steve and your consultant, you always bring up like the business value. Like the, you should really focus on like what's deliver value for the business. Like you see that as a trend coming up, or has it always been that? And I mean, is that a good way of measuring like when you do the impact, right? You as a developer, you make impact to the business in the end. And if you're a platform engineer, security, you make a
An
impact to the
impact to the
business.
business.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I think that for one, like when you're in the consulting or I mean, professional services or things like
yeah,
that, like at the end of the day, the people that pay bills are, the CFO, the finance group. So
yeah,
like, we're always going to be like, hey, how do we add business value? Because if we don't, then like, we're not going to be
yeah,
around.
yeah,
That being said, I don't particularly like, I operate, even when I wasn't doing consulting or whatever, I tend to just, my personality operated much that way. And I think that the reason for it is because like if security was the best security in the world for this product, but it didn't add business value and the
yeah,
business died, then like that's going to go away. Like
yeah,
the aspect is if it doesn't add business value, then ultimately it's not going to survive. So
yeah.
it doesn't mean that it's one or the other. Like I don't think I don't think you have to have it and say like, oh, it's either business value or security. It
No,
kind of
no,
goes back to like speed and security. So you have speed and security delivers business value because the speed of delivery is like the business value that you're getting out of it. The
yeah,
security is like a side effect of saying we're mitigating risk. We're
yeah,
saying we want to reduce the risk of exposure from a security. So really security is a risk management process, not a like just security for the sake of security. You're
no,
managing risk, and managing risk is a business operation,
yeah,
right? You're managing the risk to something, and it's the risk you're managing the risk to the business.
yeah,
So I think a lot of times because as individuals we get separated from the business, we get stuck on our task and we forget
yeah,
that we're still delivering value for the business as like the
yeah,
purpose that we're there. If that makes sense. So I think that as consultants, professional services, we're obsessed about that because that's our revenue. But at the same time, I think it's really important. Like, I think everybody wins if you think about it that way.
But I mean, it was a couple of years ago when I built a platform. I said, like, I don't care about the business. Like, I'm here to build a platform, like, to deliver to developers, and they can make sure the business, like. So I don't care about the business. My work is to build a platform and make that as good as it can be for the developers. I mean, going back, I need to rephrase that maybe to something else to be a little bit smarter and use the business as a measuring of how successful things are. I mean,
I think that there's an interesting thing there because, like, I think it's true. Like, I think both statements can be true. You're like, well, I'm not really worried about the business, like the end business product. I'm helping like the delivery team and they're delivering the business piece. But at the end of the day, it ends up being like, you can still treat it as like, well, AWS infrastructure. Yeah. That has business value, even though it's just enabling the like delivery code. And also how you deliver it can be also very influential depending on the business, what the business goals are. So if you have a group, for example, I'm trying to think of like something that might, like, actually as an example, if you've got somebody that's maybe in the government or that has security and the risk mitigation is way more important, you might focus on accelerating that more than the actual like artifact pipeline and builds and things like that. So you might focus on the things that are really slow. So for example, a group that we've been working with, their security groups are that's the slowest area of their organization because they're very, very obsessed with security. Now, focusing on speeding that up will have a massive impact on the business value of the organization because that's the slowest piece in their business. So I think that there's some interesting tweaks there of where I think both statements are true, but I think I always love tying it back to like what has the highest impact to the business because it helps prioritize the work that gets done first because you do the highest value items first, and then you win a lot of just trust doing that because when you hit the big items first, it's way easier to then gain trust. Once you have trust, then you don't have to have the same conversation over and over to say like, hey, this is a really smart way to do X. Can we do this? So you start having you don't have to fight the same battle over and over again. The trust helps you make the next battle easier to take on.
Yeah, cool. And we are coming up to 47 minutes. It's like the top time our listener can stand us ranting. So I think I'm gonna end this podcast now. Any last word, Joachim, before I press the stop?
No, I don't have anything else. I think it was great chatting. I always enjoy having just these kind of chats. It's always fun. And so no, definitely a great time.
Great to have you here, Joachim. Thanks for tuning in. I will press stop.
You have been listened to DevSecOps Talks with Matthias, Andre, and Paulina. For notes and information, please visit devsecops.fm. Thanks for tuning in.